The Sasanian Empire began with a man named Ardashir I. He was a local ruler in the province of Persis, which is, modern-day Fars in Iran. This region was actually the heartland of the old Achaemenid Persian Empire. Ardashir's family claimed to be descendants of a figure named Sasan, and that's, where the name Sasanian comes from. At that time, Persia was ruled by the Parthian Empire, also called the Arsacid Empire. The Parthian kings were really losing their power. They had lots of internal problems and were often fighting with the Roman Empire in the west. Ardashir saw this weakness as an opportunity to build something new and strong for the Persian people. Ardashir was ambitious and skilled. He started by taking control of his home province of Persis, and then began to conquer the lands around him. He challenged the authority of the Parthian king, Artabanus IV. The final battle between them happened in the year 224 at Hormozgan. Ardashir's forces defeated the Parthian army, and Artabanus IV was killed. This victory marked the end of the Parthian Empire. Ardashir then marched to the Parthian capital city of Ctesiphon, where he was crowned as the new King of Kings, or Shahanshah in Persian. This was the beginning of a new dynasty, and a new chapter in Persian history that would last for over 400 years. Ardashir wanted to create a strong, centralized empire. He wanted to bring back the glory of the ancient Persian Achaemenid Empire. He made Zoroastrianism the official state religion, which really helped to unite the people under a common faith and identity. He also reformed the government and the army. He divided the empire into provinces, each ruled by a governor who was loyal to him. He built new cities and repaired old ones. Ardashir's goal was to make his empire a great power, respected by its neighbors and honestly feared by its enemies. He created a system that would be the foundation for the Sasanian state for centuries to come. His work was not just about military conquest. Ardashir I understood the importance of culture and legacy. He ordered the creation of many rock reliefs. These large carvings on cliffs showed his victories and his divine right to rule. They were, in a way, a form of propaganda, telling the story of the new dynasty's greatness. He presented himself not just as a conqueror, but as a restorer of Persian pride and tradition. By linking his rule to the great Persian kings of the past, and to the Zoroastrian faith, Ardashir I laid a solid foundation. His vision was to build an empire that was not just powerful, but also had a strong cultural and spiritual core. Shapur I was the son of Ardashir I. He became king after his father and continued his work. Shapur I is honestly one of the most famous Sasanian kings. He was a great military leader and a skilled administrator. His biggest achievement was his success against the Roman Empire. He fought 3 major wars with the Romans. In one famous campaign, he defeated and captured the Roman Emperor Valerian in the year 260. This was a huge victory, and a great humiliation for Rome. Shapur I recorded this event in a famous rock relief at Nakshi Rustam. It shows the Roman emperor kneeling before the Sasanian king. This image became a powerful symbol of Sasanian strength. But Shapur I was not only a warrior, he was also a builder and a patron of culture. He founded many new cities, including Bishapur in his home province of Fars. He brought Roman engineers and artisans who were captured in his wars to work on these projects. This led to a mix of Persian and Roman styles in art and architecture. Shapur I was also tolerant of different religions. While Zoroastrianism was the state religion, Christians, Jews, and Manichaeans were allowed to practice their faiths. He even supported the prophet Mani, the founder of Manichaeism. Shapur I's reign was a time of great expansion and cultural development for the Sasanian Empire. Another great king was Shapur II, who ruled for a very long time. He was crowned king while he was still in his mother's womb. A crown was placed on his mother's belly, making him a king before he was even born. He ruled for 70 years, from 309 to 379. His long reign brought stability and strength to the empire. When he was young, Arab tribes raided the southern parts of the empire. Once he came of age, Shapur II led his army against them and secured the empire's borders. He was known for his firm and sometimes harsh rule, which helped to keep the empire united and strong against its enemies. Under Shapur II, the Sasanian Empire reached a new peak of power. He fought many successful wars against the Roman Empire in the west, and also secured the eastern borders against nomadic tribes from Central Asia. During his reign, Zoroastrianism became more organized. The sacred texts of the Avesta were collected and written down, which helped to create a standard version of the religion for the whole empire. Shapur II's long and powerful rule helped to define the Sasanian state. He left behind a strong, stable, and prosperous empire that was one of the two great powers of the world, alongside Rome. Khosrow I, also known as Anushirvan, is often considered the greatest of all Sasanian kings. He ruled from 531 to 579. His name, Anushirvan, actually means of the immortal soul. He came to the throne after a difficult time. A religious and social movement led by a man named Mazdak had caused a lot of chaos in the empire. Khosrow I put an end to this movement. He then started a series of important reforms. His goal was to make the empire more efficient, just, and powerful. His reforms touched every part of Sasanian society, from the tax system to the military. He is remembered in Persian history as a model of a just and wise ruler. One of Khosrow I's most important reforms was the tax system. Before him, taxes were collected based on the actual harvest each year, which was unpredictable and could be unfair. Khosrow I created a new system based on a survey of the land. Taxes were now a fixed amount based on the land's quality and what could be grown on it. This made the government's income stable and predictable, and it also made life easier for the farmers. He also reformed the army. He created a new class of professional soldiers called the Deccans. These were small landowners who served as cavalry and were loyal to the king. This made the army stronger and more reliable. Khosrow I was also a great patron of learning and culture. His court in Ctesiphon was a center for scholars and philosophers. When the famous Academy of Athens was closed by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian in 529, Khosrow I welcomed the Greek philosophers to his court. He encouraged the translation of important books from Greek, Indian, and Syriac into the Persian language, Pahlavi. The famous Book of Fables, Kalila and Dimna, was brought from India and translated during his reign. He also founded the Academy of Gandhishapur, which became one of the most important centers of learning in the world for medicine, science, and philosophy. During his reign, the Sasanian Empire was at its peak. Khosrow I fought successful wars against the Byzantine Empire, the successor to the Roman Empire in the east. He expanded the empire's borders and secured its trade routes. He built many great public works, including canals, bridges, and fortifications to protect the empire. One of his most famous projects was a long wall along the northern border, kind of similar to the Great Wall of China, to protect against nomadic tribes. Khosrow I's rule was a true golden age for the Sasanian Empire. He created a state that was not only militarily powerful but also culturally rich and well-governed. Sasanian society was very structured. It was like a pyramid with the King of Kings, the Shahanshah, at the very top. Below him were the great noble families who had a lot of power and land. The society was divided into four main classes or castes. The first class was the priests, or Mobedan. They were very important because Zoroastrianism was the state religion. The second class was the warriors, or Arteshtaran. This group included the king, the great nobles, and the soldiers. They were responsible for defending the empire. These two top classes had many privileges and held the most important positions in the government. The third class was the scribes and bureaucrats, or Dabaran. They were the administrators who ran the empire's government. They collected taxes, kept records, and managed the day-to-day business of the state. This class was very important for the efficient running of the centralized empire that kings like Khosrow I built. The fourth and largest class was the common people, or Vastrioshan. This group included farmers, herders, and artisans. They were the backbone of the Sasanian economy. They worked the land, produced goods, and paid the taxes that supported the state and the upper classes. This social structure was meant to keep order and stability in the empire. Life for the common people was centered around agriculture. Most people were farmers who lived in small villages. They grew crops like wheat, barley, and rice. They also grew fruits like grapes and dates. The land was owned by the king, the great nobles, or the Zoroastrian temples. The farmers worked the land and gave a large part of their harvest as taxes or rent. Life was hard, but the Sasanian state also invested in large irrigation projects like canals and qanats, those are underground water channels, which helped to make the land more productive. This allowed the empire to support a large population. In the cities, life was different. There were merchants, artisans, and craftsmen. Sasanian artisans were famous for their skills. They produced beautiful luxury goods including silk textiles, silverware, and glassware. These goods were sold in the busy markets of the cities and were also traded along the Silk Road. The family was the most important social unit. The father was the head of the household. Marriages were often arranged. Society was patriarchal, meaning men had more power and authority than women. However, women from noble families could own property and had some influence. Daily life was shaped by social class, religion, and the strong traditions of Persian culture. The main religion of the Sasanian Empire was Zoroastrianism. It was actually one of the oldest monotheistic religions in the world. Founded by the prophet Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, many centuries before the Sasanians, it really shaped the era in profound ways. The Sasanian kings made Zoroastrianism the official state religion, seeing it as a key part of Persian identity. This faith helped unite the diverse peoples of the empire under, one spiritual tradition. At the heart of Zoroastrianism is the cosmic struggle between a good god, Ahura Mazda, and an evil spirit, Ahriman. Humans are believed to have free will and must choose to follow the path of good, which is represented by truth and order. The Zoroastrian priests, called magi or maubeds, held a lot of power and influence in Sasanian society. They weren't just religious leaders. They also served as judges, teachers, and advisors to the king. The head of the priesthood, known as the Mobed, was actually one of the most powerful figures in the empire. The priests were responsible for maintaining the sacred fires. Fire was a central symbol in Zoroastrianism, representing the purity and light of Ahura Mazda. Fire temples were built all over the empire, and a sacred fire was kept burning in these temples at all times. These temples became important centers of religious and community life. During the Sasanian period, the religious texts of Zoroastrianism were collected and written down. The main sacred book is called the Avesta. Before the Sasanians, these teachings were passed down orally from one generation of priests to the next. The Sasanian kings, especially Shapur II, supported the project of writing the Avesta down in a special script created just for this purpose. This helped to standardize the religion and its practices across the empire, and it ensured that the ancient teachings of Zoroaster would be preserved for future generations. Honestly, this act of preservation was one of the most important cultural achievements of the Sasanian era. Now, even though Zoroastrianism was the state religion, the Sasanian Empire was home to many other faiths. There were large communities of Christians, Jews, and Manichaeans. The Sasanian kings' attitude towards these minorities varied over time. Some kings, like Shapur I, were relatively tolerant, while others were not. Christians in particular were sometimes persecuted, especially after the Roman Empire became Christian, because they were seen as being loyal to Rome, which was Persia's enemy. Despite these challenges, these minority religious communities survived and even thrived, contributing to the rich and diverse cultural landscape of the Sasanian Empire. For its entire existence, the Sasanian Empire was locked in a long and difficult conflict with its western neighbor. First, it was the Roman Empire, and later, the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. This conflict is sometimes called the Roman-Persian Wars. It was really a continuation of the rivalry that had existed for centuries between the powers of the East and West. The two empires were the superpowers of their time, and they fought over control of territory, especially in Mesopotamia, which is modern Iraq, as well as Armenia. They also fought for control of important trade routes. This long war honestly shaped the history of both empires. The wars were not continuous, though. There were periods of intense fighting followed by periods of peace. The fighting was often brutal and destructive. Cities were besieged and captured, lands were devastated, and many people were killed or taken as prisoners. There were some famous battles and campaigns that marked this long rivalry. One of the most notable was Shapur I's capture of the Roman Emperor Valerian, which was a major Sasanian victory. Later, the Roman Emperor Julian the Apostate invaded Persia but was killed in battle in 363 AD. The wars were a huge drain on the resources of both empires. They spent vast amounts of money on their armies and on building fortifications along their long border. The nature of the conflict was not just military, though. There was also a clash of cultures and ideologies. The Sasanians saw themselves as the heirs of the ancient Persian empires and the guardians of Zoroastrianism. The Romans and later the Byzantines saw themselves as the center of civilization and the protectors of Christianity. Each empire believed it had a right to rule the world, and this made it really difficult to find a lasting peace. However, there were also times of diplomacy and cultural exchange. Ambassadors traveled between the two courts, and art and ideas also flowed across the border, influencing both societies. This endless cycle of war had a terrible cost. The final and most devastating war between the Sasanians and the Byzantines took place in the early 7th century. The Sasanian king Khosrow II launched a massive invasion of the Byzantine Empire. He conquered Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. His armies even reached the walls of the Byzantine capital, Constantinople. But the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius launched a brilliant counterattack and invaded deep into Persian territory. This long war, which lasted for over 25 years, left both empires completely exhausted. They were weak, poor, and their armies were shattered. This weakness would soon leave them vulnerable to a new power rising from the south. The capital of the Sasanian Empire was the great city of Ctesiphon. It was located on the banks of the Tigris River in what is now Iraq. Ctesiphon was not just one city but actually a collection of several cities and royal residences. It was one of the largest cities in the world at the time. Its location was strategic, sitting right in the fertile land of Mesopotamia and at the crossroads of major trade routes. The city was famous for its incredible wealth and magnificent buildings. The most famous structure in Ctesiphon was the royal palace, known as the Takht Khazra. The Takht Khazra was a symbol of the Sasanian king's power and glory. Its most impressive feature was a massive vaulted arch, which, believe it or not, is still standing today. It is the largest single-span brick arch in the world. The hall under the arch was the king's audience chamber, and it was decorated with incredible luxury. According to historical accounts, the floor was covered by a huge, beautiful carpet known as the Spring of Khosrow. The carpet depicted a garden with streams and flowers made of silk, gold, and precious jewels. Ctesiphon was the political, economic, and cultural heart of the vast Sasanian Empire. It was the place where the King of Kings ruled from his magnificent throne. Besides the capital, the Sasanian Empire had many other important cities. Some, like Bishapur and Firuzabad, were founded by Sasanian kings. These cities were often carefully planned, with a circular or grid layout. They served as administrative centers and had palaces, fire temples, and fortifications. Gandhishapur in southwestern Iran was another very important city. It was famous for its academy and hospital, becoming a major center for the study of medicine, science, and philosophy. Scholars from all over the world, including Greeks, Indians, and Syrians, came to Gandhishapur to study and teach. These cities were connected by a network of trade routes. The most famous of these was the Silk Road, which connected China with the Mediterranean world. The Sasanian Empire was located right in the middle of this route, giving the Sasanians control over the very profitable trade in silk, spices, and other luxury goods. They also controlled sea routes through the Persian Gulf. Sasanian merchants traveled to India, Sri Lanka, and even China. This trade brought immense wealth to the empire, and it also brought new ideas, technologies, and cultural influences. The cities of the empire were vibrant, cosmopolitan places where people from many different cultures met and exchanged goods and ideas. The beginning of the end for the Sasanian Empire was the long and destructive war with the Byzantine Empire. This war, which lasted from 602 to 628 AD, was started by King Khosrow II. At first, the Sasanians were very successful and conquered vast territories from the Byzantines, but the war dragged on for too long, and it drained the empire's treasury and manpower. The Byzantine Emperor Heraclius eventually managed to defeat the Sasanian armies. Khosrow II was overthrown and killed by his own son in 628 AD. His death marked the start of a period of chaos and civil war. After Khosrow II's death, the Sasanian Empire fell into a state of anarchy. In just a few years there was a quick succession of many different kings and queens, but none of them could establish control over the empire. The powerful noble families fought among themselves for power, the central government collapsed, and the army was weak and divided. The long war had also caused widespread destruction and economic problems. High taxes and the devastation of the land made life very difficult for the common people. The empire was internally broken and exhausted. It was in this state of extreme weakness that a new and unexpected threat appeared. This new threat came from the Arabian Peninsula. United by the new religion of Islam, Arab armies began to expand out of Arabia. They first attacked the Sasanian territories in Mesopotamia, and the weakened Sasanian army was not able to stop them. The decisive battle took place at Al-Qadisiyah in 636 AD. The main Sasanian army, led by the general Rostam Farrukhzad, was defeated. The Arab armies then captured the Sasanian capital of Ctesiphon and took its immense treasures. The last Sasanian king, Yazdegerd III, fled to the east, trying to rally support to fight back. Yazdegerd III tried for years to gather a new army and reclaim his empire, but it was too late. The spirit of the Sasanian state was broken. He was chased from one province to another by the advancing Arab armies, and the conquest of the rest of Persia continued. Finally, in 651 AD, Yazdegerd III was killed near the city of Merv, in the far northeast of his crumbling empire. His death marked the official end of the Sasanian dynasty and the Sasanian Empire. After more than 400 years of power and glory, the last great empire of ancient Persia had fallen. The land of Iran became part of the new and rapidly growing Islamic Caliphate. The fall of the Sasanian Empire was not the end of Persian culture. The legacy of the Sasanians was very strong, and it continued to influence the region for many centuries. The new Arab rulers of Persia adopted many Sasanian ideas about government and administration. The Sasanian system of bureaucracy, with its scribes and tax collectors, became a model for the new Islamic caliphates, especially the Abbasid Caliphate. The Abbasids even moved their capital to Baghdad, very close to the old Sasanian capital of Ctesiphon. Sasanian court ceremonies, titles, and styles of kingship were also copied by later Islamic rulers. Persian culture experienced a revival under Islamic rule. The Persian language, which had been the language of the Sasanian court, evolved into New Persian. It was now written in the Arabic script. This new Persian language became the language of literature and poetry. The greatest work of Persian literature, the Shahnameh or Book of Kings, was written by the poet Ferdowsi around 1000 AD. It tells the stories of the mythical and historical kings of Iran, with a large part dedicated to the Sasanian kings and heroes. The Shahnameh helped to preserve the memory, legends, and cultural identity of ancient Persia for future generations. Sasanian art and architecture also left a lasting mark. The massive arch of the Takht Khazra in Ctesiphon influenced the design of mosques and palaces in the Islamic world. Sasanian artistic motifs, such as winged lions, griffins, and scenes of hunting and royal life, were used in Islamic art for centuries. Sasanian metalwork, textiles, and ceramics were highly valued, and their styles were copied and adapted by artisans in the Islamic world and beyond. The Sasanian style had a significant impact on the development of what we now call Islamic art. This really shows the deep respect that later cultures had for Sasanian artistic achievements. The Sasanian Empire is important because it represents the last great expression of ancient Near Eastern civilization before the coming of Islam. It was a bridge between the ancient world and the medieval Islamic world. The Sasanians created a powerful and sophisticated state that was a rival to Rome and Byzantium for centuries. They developed a rich culture that blended Persian traditions with influences from other parts of the world. Even though the empire fell, its ideas, culture, and memory did not disappear. They became a fundamental part of the new civilization that emerged in the region, shaping the identity of Iran and the wider Islamic world in ways that can still be seen today.